With Saquon Barkley out this week, should Wayne Gallman be in your lineup? And we have special guest Steve Buzzard here. We'll tell you more about what his long list of accomplishments are later. But first, we're going to get to the Vegas lines. This is the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid presented by DraftKings. And we're about to get you ready for the Week 4 main slate. John, tell us, what do those Vegas lines look like this week?
I'm expecting a full repertoire of bird jokes with Buzzard being on the show this week, Austin, so that's on you, okay?
Hey, that's my specialty.
I know, you're good at it, so I'm just leading the show with it. This week in Vegas, Vegas Value Chart is posted live every Tuesday on Footballguys.com. This week, it's an interesting week. 3 out of the top 4 team totals, Kansas City, the Chargers against Miami, and Seattle traveling to Arizona. All of them are away favorites this week. Kansas City almost a touchdown favorite. The Chargers playing Miami, who are historically bad, are 15.5-point favorites. And Seattle almost a touchdown favorite. Typically, this can be kind of a trappy situation. It'll be interesting to see what the other guys think this week in terms of taking running backs from those teams. I think there's one that's fairly safe, and we'll all agree on that. The one home team that's kind of at the top of that list are the Rams, playing against Tampa Bay, who kind of have an interesting defense that we'll talk about in terms of how you attack that defense. Outside of that, we have a battle of the basement in the NFC East with a relatively high scoring total of 50 points. That's the Giants in Washington without Saquon Barkley. So a lot to talk about today, and we might as well just jump right into it.
Yep. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Devin, we're going to go to you first on quarterbacks. Is this just start Patrick Mahomes and move on?
Yeah, in cash, probably on DraftKings at 7,500. But on FanDuel, I'm actually going a little bit different this week, assuming the injuries hold up. So I'm actually going with Lamar Jackson. You don't get the three-point bump for the 300-yard guarantee essentially Mahomes is throwing for 300 nearly every week. So you can just start him with, 15 points right off the bat. And Jackson has the rushing ability. And what we saw on Monday night is that Cleveland's secondary is really banged up. So Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, Demarius Randall, and Morgan Burnett all missed last week. And it looks like Demarius Randall will be back, but it's looking like Ward and Greedy Williams both could be out. So that's a pretty big deal for the Browns in that they're pretty banged up. So it's a rushing matchup that is a tough one, and we'll get into Mark Ingram in a little bit. But I think he's in a tough spot, and the Browns are running out Terrence Mitchell, who ran a 4.63 40 in 2014. So he's a veteran. Slow, even coming out of college, and he has to deal with Marquise Brown for most of the game. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there that Lamar Jackson should have pretty good upside. Going down a little bit, Daniel Jones is a guy that I'm looking at. So going up against Washington, and this Redskins defense, John talked about it, it's a little bit of a shootout. And we saw Daniel Jones have rushing ability and rushing upside this year. I think he was clocked at 19 miles an hour rushing this past week, and he ran for the game-winning touchdown. He's still relatively cheap at 5,300 on DraftKings and 7,300 on FanDuel. So in a prime matchup, Josh Norman is not the player that he used to be, and the rest of the Redskins secondary, Fabian Moreau, has been often injured this year. So it's a bit of a GPP play, but he's a guy that I think has rushing upside that you should look at.
And I think after last week, he's going to be a popular pick. We want to welcome in our special guest this week, Steve Buzzard. Ryan is on assignment. He'll be back next week. But
what's his assignment?
His assignment is a day job trip. An important day job trip. As hard as it is to believe, this isn't Ryan's first gig; it's his second gig. So, we're
Thank
playing.
God it's not his first gig.
I was just really thankful. I was just thankful he finally got the check from me, giving me a chance to get on the show with you guys.
Exactly. Speaking of checks, Steve had a great season last season. He's sort of known as someone who's taken down a couple of big GPPs. He took down a FanDuel Million last year. He took down the FanDuel WFFC last year. And we quote his ownership projections on the show all the time. You can find those in our DFS lineup builder, and as well as a standalone article on our DFS page. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you on the show. I want to hear what you think about quarterbacks this week and whether you agree or disagree with some of those guys that Devin brought up.
Yep. So first, thanks for having me on. Always enjoyed watching you guys here the last several years. One of my favorite shows to catch each week. So thanks for that. And no kidding that I was super thankful to hear that Ryan couldn't make it, and he did get that check. So thanks for that. So I pretty much agree with what Devin says, which is kind of boring, right? So
no one does that on the show, Steve, by the way.
I know. What's going on here?
No one agrees with Devin.
So Lamar
Steve,
Jackson,
if you go to the comment section and say you agree with Devin, you'll be the only one who does it. I promise you that.
Off to a great start, right? So I think Lamar Jackson is the way to go on FanDuel cash as well. The one thing that I do think that is a little bit tricky on the DraftKings cash options is I don't think that Daniel Jones is only a GPP option. I think he certainly can be in play as a cash game play. Also, that 5,300 cash point that Devin mentioned is right there, and it helps you get some really good savings. So that might allow you to get in some of the other higher price guys that we'll talk about, like Kelsey for instance later. So I think he is a fair option. Certainly that could completely blow up. A lot of people thought coming into the game last week he was going to be a disaster. So maybe we shouldn't be jumping on him after one game, but a telling sign has really been that the Vegas line opened up and has moved up 3.5 points since opening. So at least some really pretty smart people are buying into the Daniel Jones hype train so far. The other consideration that a lot of people are going to be on is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has had back-to-back 300 yards games with 400 last week as well, and he's had TD counts of 2, 3, and 2 in each of the games as well. So he's been really consistent this year. He's facing the up-tempo team, Arizona, and we should expect a fair amount of snaps for Wilson. So I think he's a good cash game option as well. So those are the main guys that I'm looking at. A couple of they're the same as Devin, as well as Wilson.
Yeah, John, what do you think about that bunch, and who else do you have on your list?
They got him. The three I have on cash. Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes is Mr. Consistency. He's going to cost you, but you can do that, and as long as you can find value elsewhere, you're all set because he's pretty much guaranteed for 303 these days. Lamar Jackson is also on my cash game list, and then Steve just hit my last one, and that was Russell Wilson against Arizona. He talked about the pace, and look at Wilson in terms of what he's done so far this year. I think he had 4 touchdowns last week, 300 passing yards the week prior. And he's really actually benefiting from a fantasy perspective in terms of how bad the Seahawks defense has played this year. They haven't blown out a team yet. And, Arizona's got a decent offense this year with what we've seen thus far. So that game is interesting for both cash and GPP purposes. So speaking of GPP, the player I might talk about at this position is Jared Goff. Goff goes against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's kind of got this pass funnel defense right now. I think Tampa Bay's been the toughest defense, if I'm not mistaken, against the run this season. And DVOA, I think they're second against the run. And we saw last week that they can be beaten through the air multiple times. So I think Jared Goff on a team that hasn't really run the ball well this year is a guy that I'll be looking at. 6,300. Steve, I don't know what you have him owned at. Jared Goff, 5%. So if he goes off at 5%, I'm more than happy to take over the field at that level, particularly for a team that, as I led off with the Vegas value chart, third highest team total on the board at 29.3 points, playing at home. There is a risk, and the risk is that they get ahead and they grind you to death with a combination of Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown. But I don't think we've seen that yet this year. So more than happy to try to take a chance with him at that 5% ownership and relatively modest salary.
I'm looking at down our list on the DFS lineup optimizer, and I see Matthew Stafford's name fairly high on the list and also decently owned at about 6%. Steve, is Stafford a guy you might consider for GPPs, or do you have another GPP pick you like more?
Yeah, I think Stafford is reasonable. He'll be facing Kansas City and the Mahomes that we mentioned earlier. So one thing we know all year long is Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to be putting up points. It's going to force Stafford and the Lions to continue to pass. The Lions are playing at home, and historically they have also been giving up more points at home actually than what they do on the road. Playing inside the dome is the reason for that. And I think this is the first game I believe I saw that Mahomes has played in a dome, so it'll be interesting to see how he does in that situation. So all that is a long way of saying, yeah, I think Stafford is going to have to catch up a lot, and I think he'll make a little bit of a good play there. I do think he's a little bit high owned potentially for the matchup, so I think a lot of people are on that same train of thought as well. Another quarterback that I like from a GPP perspective is Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan always is going to be a favorite for mine. Remind me those two contests that you talked about earlier.
Right.
So I'm never going to go against him. Got to play him pretty much every week. But Matt Ryan's kind of been quiet. So he's at 5% owned, and he's had 3 straight games of 300 yards, 2+ TDs in each of those games. And he's got some really good playmakers with Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones that are really good quarterbacks to pair with him. So I think that Matt Ryan is a really good solid play.
You're starting off the show really well there, Steve, because Ryan is required, I think, by contract to mention Julio Jones on the show, and you took care of that early on. So good job filling in for Ryan. Who else you got, Devin?
He made mention that I had to cover that.
Right, exactly. That's part of the deal.
I got 2 guys at less than 1% owned that Steve has.
Okay.
So get your red black eye Joes ready. The first is Gardner Minshew for the Jaguars. Bryce Callahan and Kareem Jackson might miss this week, so keep an eye on that. If they miss, people are going to look at this Denver secondary and think that it's an extremely tough matchup. It may not be if those guys do miss. I think there's a little bit of upside there. We've seen Minshew's rushing ability, and he's pretty cheap at 5,200. And then the next guy is I really don't want to say this, but it's Baker Mayfield. So Baker Mayfield at 0.9% owned on FanDuel and 1.4% owned on DraftKings. How are the Browns going to move the ball? It's not going to be on the ground against this Ravens defense, even though they're going to try. Outside of Marlon Humphrey, they don't have much as far as a secondary goes. So Anthony Averett has allowed the 3rd most passing yards of any corner in football at 269 yards passing so far. And the team has given back-to-back weeks of 350 or more. So it's a situation in which the Browns may just come out and start throwing. They need to get Baker Mayfield right and really just this offense right. And I see a scenario in which at 1% owned, there's a decent chance that they come out and they throw the ball over the field.
Nice. Let's move on.
I know I said I was never going to mention the Browns this year, and so far it's paid off. But I think if you can get a quarterback who many took in the top 5 in season-long leagues at 1% owned, and he's the – what is he? He's the 10th most expensive quarterback on DraftKings. I think he's definitely in play.
Nice. All right. We're going to move on to running backs. And Steve, I'm going to pitch it to you first for running backs. But if you please comment in the YouTube comments whether you disagree with Devin's picks or agree with everyone else's picks. Be sure to put your comments in the YouTube comments there. Steve, tell us which running backs you're going with this week.
All right. So I think both a GPP and a cash game play is Austin Eckler. So Eckler has been amazing to me the last year as well. Every time that Melvin Gordon has missed a game, it seems like he's made me some money, and just I think public is finally starting to catch on to it a little bit. He's up at 26% owned on my current rankings. So I don't think he's under the radar anymore, but there for a long time he wasn't. This is going to be the last chance to get Eckler without Gordon, as Gordon's coming back allegedly. We'll see, but it sounds like next week. So I think you definitely can plug in Eckler. He's kind of the model of consistency. He has 6+ targets in each of the games this year. Consistently scores in the 20-point range. And he's starting to get priced up a little bit, but I would definitely have him as a core part of my plays. The second one that I think is kind of an interesting borderline cash play and definitely a GPP play, and I know a lot of people will hate this one. But
if you say Leonard Fournette, you're kicked off the show.
What?
If you can say Baker Mayfield, he can say Leonard Fournette.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Trent Richardson 2.0.
And I like the Fournette call. He's on my list as well, Steve. So you get the tip and pick seal of approval. I don't know what that counts for, but it certainly is as valuable as the Devin whatever the hell he does, this down whatever.
So Fournette cost me earlier in the year when I finished.
Oh, no kidding.
The Millie Maker. Fournette had a disappointing game and would have had a good shot of winning that one if he would have done a little bit better. But he's getting some major carries. He's getting for his snap percentages 97% and 100% the last 2 weeks. 6+ targets in pretty much every game. And yes, he hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but certainly touchdowns are pretty fickle things. So I don't think he's consistent, but the fact that he's coming off at 12% and how terrible he looked at on Thursday Night Football last week, I think that public is kind of going to be off of him, and you can get him for pretty cheap too, $6,000 on DraftKings, for instance. So I think those are two really good options for folks.
Good luck with that.
Devin's losing his mind over this Leonard Fournette pick.
I just don't understand the love that people have. And I have a conference call with David tomorrow about a variety of different things, and I need to have part of that be an intervention about both Leonard Fournette and Chris Carson because he loves both of them way too much this year. And speaking of Carson,
Chris Carson's also lost me a lot too, so darn it.
Yeah, so you and David think pretty similarly. Carson, you can't trust. Like I don't care what his projections are in cash. He's going to pop in a lot of projections again. This guy has one fumble, and I'm not talking about Fournette. I'm talking about Carson, just to be clear. He's one fumble away from losing his job. I mean, he was benched for the entire second half last week. It's at this point, it's not a good situation.
Let's see, Devin, we'll come back to you on more running backs.
Sure.
John, tell me about some of the running backs you like. Oh, by the way, that Austin Eckler pick is going to be popular also because Justin Jackson got a limited practice on Thursday. He seems, maybe he goes and he's fine, but he seems a little bit,
if he doesn't play, does Melvin Gordon play?
Melvin Gordon might see a little action if
I think
Justin
he's active.
Jackson. Yeah, I think he's at least active. He's definitely not the majority of the work or anything like that. Not until week 5, but yeah, we could see a little bit of Melvin Gordon if Justin Jackson sits. What do you
think? To be
John?
clear, do not play MG3. Don't play Melvin Gordon. No matter what you hear, he's not going to play enough to be valuable. So the only thing you need to monitor, we record this show on Thursday night, is just make sure that Melvin Gordon's not going to get half the carries or the snaps or a third of the snaps. I suspect it's not going to be that high, and it's probably a moot point, but I say that just for the sake of posterity.
If Justin Jackson's actually inactive, that does worry me a little bit, because I think as the game's going on, they're more likely to give Gordon a chance if he's the only other option, which we've already heard the coaches talk today on how Melvin Gordon is still their guy. Whether he should be or shouldn't be is another question, but they've already said that. So that does worry me a little bit, actually, if Justin Jackson's out.
Right, because if Justin Jackson is in, then Gordon's probably inactive, and it's a much clearer picture. Right. John, what do you got?
All right. So Eckler, Fournette is on my list as well. I think Devin's just mad because that invalidates his Gardner Minshew pick from earlier in the show.
I'm just trying to save you guys money. Like, that's all I'm trying to do.
I'm very appreciative of that.
He had 15 carries for what? -3 yards, and then he broke a 60-yard run, and everyone is back in.
I think that Steve brought up a great point about touchdowns, how fickle they are, and the guy is getting a slew. He's getting a slew of touches, and at some point he'll have some regression that favors in the positive side. But that's my opinion, and feel free to fade him, because I think we're playing against one another this week. So maybe I'll just take your money, even though you said you're not giving me $90. Christian McCaffrey going against Houston. The guy continues to get a slew of touches in that offense. He's the focal point. He's had 29, 18, and 27 touches in the past 3 weeks. He goes up against a Houston team that really doesn't scare me, especially because he's going to probably be playing from behind in full PPR, which is the sites that I tend to play most at, DraftKings and Fantasy Draft. I really like him this week, even though his salary is a bit inflated at $8,800 and $17,700 over at Fantasy Draft. I'm actually curious. I have a couple GPP picks, but I got a guy that's kind of on the verge. I'm curious to know where you guys stand on Chris Thompson this week against the Giants. He's 4,500, 8,800 at Fantasy Draft. The guy is getting no running back on the Redskins has more snaps than this guy. Last week he played more snaps out of the backfield than anybody else. He just nosed out Adrian Peterson, to be honest. And he caught over the past 3 weeks 7, 5, and 4 passes for doing some rough math in my head, about 200 yards. So add in a few random carries and a defense that we're not too scared of. Is he a cash game play? Is he only GPP, or is he none of the above? What do you guys think?
I think he's a good cash game play. He's kind of right on the border as well for me. You mentioned the targets. They're pretty consistent. At his price point, I think he's going to have a fair chance of paying off your points that you need for your cash game lineup. I think he's gone 10, 14, 14, something like that the last couple of weeks, and you'll be pretty happy with that for 4,500. So I think that's a really good option. A lot of people are worried about his lack of touchdowns. I don't think he scored a touchdown since like week 1 of 2018, something like that. But his opportunity metrics, so I kind of have a metric that weighs how likely they are to score touchdowns based on where they're getting carries and touches from. And his opportunities are still there, so he's only about 18% lower than a lot of other receivers and running backs. So I think he still has a good chance of scoring a touchdown as well, even though he hasn't done it in a long time. So I do think that limits him a little bit from a GPP perspective because he doesn't get in there all the time. He does have that little bit of a lower ratio. But for cash games, he's definitely a good play on DraftKings, not so much on FanDuel.
Devin, you've raised your eyebrows at a couple of these guys' picks.
Imagine that.
Who do you like?
Yeah. I think for me, if I'm saving money, it's going to Wayne Gallman, especially in cash. I think that filling in for Saquon Barkley, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's sort of a Saquon Barkley light. I don't even want to. Not great.
The look on John's face.
But he's 4,600 on DraftKings, and I think his floor is 3 to 4 catches. He's going to see 15 carries or so against a Washington defense that really hasn't been that great. So in cash, I don't love it in GPPs. I think he's extremely highly owned. I think Steve has him over 20%. So I don't see the upside there, but I think his floor is above 10 points, which for cash is more than enough, especially when you're trying to save. Kerryon Johnson's a guy that I like. Don't know if I can go there in cash, simply because Kerryon Johnson has been absolutely awful this year, and he's facing a Chiefs rushing defense that really has been let me put it this way. People think that they're forcing you to throw, but teams are still running on them at a pretty high rate. So we even saw Josh Jacobs run for 97 yards or so. So 2 of the 3 running backs they faced this year have went over 100 yards, and they have some of the worst linebacking play in the league in Anthony Hitchens and Damian Wilson. So I think that similar to what we saw in Mark Ingram, and I mentioned him last week on the show, is that these teams are going to try to establish the run, especially early against the Chiefs, to try and slow the pace down, slow the offense, keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. And to do that, you're going to have to go to Kerryon Johnson. So, like I said, I don't know if I trust it in cash at the moment, but in GPPs, I think at 21%, it's still a number that I'm comfortable with.
There's a few guys on my list here that did not get mentioned. We've got Ito Smith of the Falcons dealing with a concussion. It sounds like he got a limited practice in on Thursday in a non-contact jersey, so maybe he's back. But if he misses, I don't know if that makes Devonta Freeman an interesting play against Tennessee. I see a no from John. Then we've got Phillip Lindsay, Marlon Mack. Anybody have any interest in either of those guys? Royce Freeman's a little bit banged up.
I like Phillip
Maybe some
Lindsay.
Marlon Mack. Yeah, maybe we like both of those guys. Yeah, they're not bad. I mean, the odds are definitely in the favor of Marlon Mack. You know, this is a run-heavy team. They're 6.5-point home favorites against Oakland, and we got a guy on the show wearing a Colts hat, so that's got to mean something, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think? This is your team. Well, there you go. There's the answer.
Yeah, he's not my favorite play of the week. He did look pretty good. A lot of the time we thought he was very questionable going into the game last week, and he looked pretty good versus what we thought. So that was a pretty good sign. And if T.Y. Hilton ends up missing, they'll certainly they've been very run heavy already this year. I think that they're the most run heavy team. And they're going to be even more so if T.Y. Hilton ends up missing the game. I'll mention one other guy that you didn't mention.
Sure.
Austin, and that's a specific kind of to FanDuel actually is David Johnson. So David Johnson's at only 6,800 on FanDuel, which is a really great price in that offense. We talked about the tempo that the Arizona is running, and I think David Johnson at that price point and in that offense is pretty interesting. He's not getting targeted quite as much if you look at his year-long stats as he was last year, but that's really heavy on week 2 where he only had 1 target. The other 2 weeks he had 6 and 7, so that kind of makes him pretty safe. Certainly Seattle's not the most ideal situation to be running against, but I don't think it's a terrible situation either.
Is he safe enough for cash, or is that more of a GPP choice?
I think he's borderline for cash just because of how cheap he is. So at 6,800, you're choosing between him and Leonard Fournette. So maybe Devin can let us know which one he would rather play there. But they're both kind of at that same price range. So
yeah, Devin, what did you say?
So real quick on Lindsay. So Royce Freeman's dealing with a shoulder injury, and that could It's a bit narrative-y, but it could limit his pass blocking a little bit. So use a lot of shoulder movement in your pass blocking. Their running backs have caught eight passes and 9 passes over the last 2 weeks, and they've sort of been split about 50-50. So if Freeman is truly limited by a shoulder issue, there's a possibility that he may not be in there for pass blocking opportunities, depending on how bad his shoulder is. And I don't know if we'll know that before game time, but it's something to think about.
That's a good point. Please hit the subscribe button and hit that bell so you get notifications from us. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. Please help us. But because we got to 9,000, that milestone a couple weeks ago, Devin has invited 5 of you to a FanDuel league to play against 4 Football Guys staffers. Devin, did you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I posted the names on Twitter, so you should have received an invite if you were invited. I'll post the names in the comments too. And then it'll be Ryan, myself, John, and David Dodds joining the contest. So if you beat all 4 of us, you get $90. And we're gonna do some big things for the 10,000 subscriber mark when we get there, including some all pro subscriptions that we're gonna be giving away without having to beat us. So it's a guaranteed giveaway because I don't think anyone's gonna beat us this week.
Probably not.
That's what you said last year.
Yeah, we didn't do so well.
Yeah. So we look forward to that challenge. We'll post the contest so that people can follow along and see whether you guys, the fans, were able to take down the Football Guys staffers. Let's talk about wide receivers. John, why don't we go to you first for wide receivers? We already mentioned the T.Y. Hilton injury. He didn't practice on Thursday, looking a little bit doubtful there. Mike Williams and Travis Benjamin are hurt for the Chargers. Neither one of them practiced on Thursday. Chris Godwin didn't practice on Thursday. And there's a couple of cornerbacks that could impact matchups this week. Jalen Ramsey has got some issues, may not play this week. And then it looks like Darius Slay might play this week. But again, he's been limited the past couple of days in practice. John, tell me what you think.
Keenan Allen.
That was hard.
He's pretty good. That guy's pretty good.
The guy has 42 targets through 3 games. And this week his team is slated to score 30 points against Miami. Keenan Allen's your cash game lock this week. I won't tell you he's going to reach 3x value, but how heavily owned will he be? You guys – we've got a cash game expert in Devin and an ownership expert in Buzzard. Is he going to be 60 to 70% owned this week in cash games?
I was going to say 75 to 80.
Yeah. So, I mean, from that end, you don't want to go against those people because if he has a big game and you're in that 20%, you're fighting, you're losing basically. So just slot him in and beat your competitors at a different position. So Keenan Allen.
FanDuel, I'll say 50 just because it's not PPR, but 75 on DraftKings.
And you have no problem starting both Allen and Eckler in the same cash game lineup?
I mean, I'm sure Buzzard knows this off the top of his head, but I got to think that 50+% of the offense is running through those 2 players at this point. And given that they have the second highest team total on the board, I don't have a problem with it.
And it's Miami. Yeah. I figured. I just wanted to clarify.
No, that's a fair question. So 2 other guys in cash games. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Odell Beckham this week. I think Devin wants to talk about him, but I agree with what Devin's going to tell you. And Christian Kirk looks like he is just coming into his own in Arizona. The number of plays that they're running, he's actually has more targets this season than Larry Fitzgerald. 12, 8, and 12 over the past 3 games. So volume's where it's at, particularly in PPR and cash games. And he's running out of the slot again this week, opposite Larry Fitzgerald against Seattle, in a game where they should be playing from behind as touchdown underdogs. So those are kind of the cash game guys I'm looking at. There's another player there I want to talk about, but I suspect one of the other 2 are going to bring him up. I think I'll stop there. I think I'll come back. If we don't come back in GPP, I'll bring it back in parting thoughts. But those are the 3 guys that I think kind of top the list for cash game wide receivers this week.
I think I'm gonna have to capture that soundbite of I agree with whatever Devin's about to say, and we're just gonna replay that because that may be the first time anyone on the show has ever said that. Devin, we'll come to you next about wide receivers.
Odell Beckham might be my favorite GPP play this week. I mentioned earlier Marlon Humphrey is about all that the Ravens have, and he hasn't been a shadow guy this entire year. So he didn't shadow Christian Kirk on the outside against Arizona. He didn't shadow Sammy Watkins. He just stays on his side of the field for the most part. And what do we know about Odell Beckham? He plays all three positions. So he'll move to the slot, he'll move to the left side, he'll move to the right side. They're going to try and take advantage of Jimmy Smith and Tavon Young being out for Baltimore. And we've seen Baltimore give up, like I mentioned earlier, 349 yards in 2 straight games. So it's a game in which it only takes one for Beckham, and we've seen time and time again that if he gets the ball on a slant, no one's catching him if he gets behind you. So I think he's in a tremendous spot this week. I do think Keenan Allen is the top cash game play. Moving down the board, I'm going back to Emmanuel Sanders. I know he wasn't great last week, but he ended up with, what did he have? He only had 2 catches, but it's a game in which, and he's dealing with a quad injury, but he still is cheap. So if he's healthy, keep an eye on it. But he's getting the consistent targets against the Bears and the Raiders. I think he's at 40-something hundred.
49 on DraftKings.
Yeah, 49 on DraftKings. I like him a little bit more on FanDuel at 55 just because I think he's a better red zone target. I think that once they get down there, Flacco and him have had a nice little connection. Going way down the board, I know that John loves this guy, at least he used to. GPP dark horse is Cole Beasley at 4,700. So Beasley is a guy who the Patriots defense, I think it's hard to tell how good they are because their combined record of opponents is 0-9. They played the Steelers, Jets, and Dolphins. So how good are they? But they look like they're the best defense in football. I think we can all sort of agree on that. They've only given up 3 offensive points on the year. They've had 2 straight shutouts. I'm excluding the punt return or punt fumble for a touchdown and a pick 6 last week. They basically shut the Jets out. But how are the Bills going to move the ball? We saw Beasley last week have 8 catches out of the slot. I think there's going to be a lot of quick passes to Beasley to try and move the ball against the Patriots. He's not going to be popular, and he's a guy that I'm looking at. And then one last guy I'll throw out there, and that's Terry McLaurin at 4,500. I think he's going to be incredibly popular. He's a guy who we've seen these guys time and time again where they've had big Monday night games and the pricing is already out for before the game is over. So McLaurin at 4,500 has scored in 3 straight games. He's gone for 60 yards or more in 3 straight games. He's had 5 catches for 3 straight games. He's the number 1 receiver in that offense. And even if Case Keenum misses, and it doesn't look like he's going to, his college roommate is the backup. So if Dwayne Haskins comes in, it's a little bit of a narrative, but he's going to look for the guy that he's thrown to for the last 5 years. So that's sort of where I'm at. And then on fantasy draft, Amari Cooper might be my favorite guy one of my favorite guys this week, going up against Marshawn Lattimore, who has given up. Marshawn Lattimore has a big name, but he's given up the most passing yards allowed this season.
And with McLaurin, just keep an eye out on his injury status. He popped up as a limited practice on Thursday with a hamstring thing. There's no indications he's going to miss yet, but just keep an eye on him. Steve, tell us, what do you agree with here? What are some other guys you like?
All right. I really agree with a lot of those picks again. So
we need disagreements.
Same page there. I think McLaurin is going to be, like you mentioned, Devin, is going to be really popular, especially on DraftKings. Very consistent scoring. That Monday night highlight reel kind of, got a lot of people's attention. I don't think people knew who he was nearly as much as they do at this time last week as they do now. So I think that's really going to jump them up there. And everyone wants to play the wide receivers against the Giants as well. So I think you might as well just lock him into your cash game lineups. He's going to be a pretty good play there. It'll be a lot more questionable on the GPP side. He's at 23% owned on my list right now. Some chances that he'll really get up to 30% by the end of the week, depending on how a couple of people promote him throughout the week. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And if he gets up there, then that really starts to get a little bit questionable on if you want to play him in your GPPs. If he does start to get up there, who I really like to look at is some of his other competition. So like Trey Quinn, Paul Richardson as kind of like leverage plays against McLaurin to see how that goes. And you can not only take advantage of McLaurin failing, but also get the points from guys that get them from him. So I think those are interesting plays, and they're kind of in the 5% range. So I think that is a good one. Also, I like already mentioned Matt Ryan earlier. I like the hookup with him and Julio Jones, as well as Calvin Ridley. I think both of those guys against Tennessee is a pretty good spot for them. Pretty much every week Julio Jones is a good play. This is no exception. And Calvin Ridley's been a little bit quiet here the last couple of weeks, so I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him have a pretty big game coming up from there. John, what do you think about Keenan Allen in tournaments at 32% owned? Where do you see him?
Oh, I think you have to fade that, right? I think you have to go underweight. I mean, the guy in 32% on Thursday is 36 to 40% on Sunday, more often than not.
So you saying I sandbag these really weak numbers?
No, I think what happens is, enough information comes out and people start getting excited about some of these favorites that, we typically see the numbers creeping up on these really popular plays by the weekend. So if Keenan Allen's going off at 35 to 40%, I'm underweight. And in fact, you've got him at 31.8% right now. I'll probably be underweight on that. He's always been a big volume guy, but not a big touchdown guy. At least, anecdotally in my memory, he's not been a guy that scores as much as we've seen him score over the past couple weeks. He's got 3 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks, and then you add in, that week last week, what he did last week was just insane. He just tore apart that Texans defense. So I'll be underweight. Is that you as well, I'm guessing?
That's why I asked you.
Yeah.
I think it's a really tough call just because he's been so consistent.
But it's 16.5 point favorites, right? I mean, how much are they going to be throwing? They should be able to hand the ball off quite a bit and just run this game out. I don't know. Sorry, I cut you off.
I'll probably end up under, but most of the time, if a wide receiver gets that high, that's the case for me. No question. Like with McLaurin, for instance. Keenan Allen, though, I don't know. I could see a lot of ways that he can pay off pretty easily.
So I'm glad you brought up McLaurin in that strategy, because that was actually when I kind of stopped talking at Cash Game. I wanted to talk about McLaurin and what I saw when I pulled up your numbers this evening in kind of some of my pre-show prep. At 23%, I don't know what's going to happen over the next couple of days with a guy like McLaurin. He's been super consistent. I have zero problems with him in your cash games. Put him in your cash games and feel good about it. But in GPPs, he's still a rookie, and there are other options on this offense. One of whom I think Steve mentioned is Paul Richardson. He's cheaper at 3,700. He's 7,300 over a fantasy draft, and he's owned at about a quarter of the rate of McLaurin. There is no way that McLaurin is 4 times as likely to achieve GPP value this week than Paul Richardson against the New York Giants. And so just from strict game strategy perspective, you have to be underweight on McLaurin and overweight on Richardson. And it goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about with Chris Thompson earlier as well. But, you have to be underweight on McLaurin at 25% ownership, assuming that's what he goes off into the weekend. And of course, Steve updates these numbers just about daily, including into Sunday. So certainly sneak a peek at the links on the DFS landing page throughout the weekend to see where he ends up.
Can I ask about two more guys?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
What are we doing with Curtis Samuel? We just saw Keenan Allen shred this defense. Curtis Samuel at 4,600 seems like he's too cheap. He plays about 30% of the snaps out of the slot, and he was Kyle Allen's. I mean, he was a frequent target last week. He had 5 for 53 and a touchdown. So he's a guy that, if you're looking to save some money in cash, I think isn't the worst play.
I think that Allen did so well because he runs exclusively out of the slot. I mean, Jarius Wright, I think, runs about 80% out of the slot, and I'm certainly not going to recommend him on this show. I don't have a problem with Samuel. I actually have Kyle Allen. I didn't talk about it, but he's a GPP play on my list this week. I still think he's too cheap against Houston. Houston's shown some deficiencies in their secondary, but from a cash game perspective, and I don't play a lot at FanDuel, so I won't speak to that, but I think from a volume perspective and just PPR, I don't know that I can do Samuel this week.
And then what about Cooper Kupp out of the slot against MJ Stewart for Tampa? Kupp looks like he might be the number one guy in Los Angeles. I was about to say San Diego. That hasn't been in a while, but he had a couple key drops last week, and he would have had a monster game last week against the Browns. I think he at 6,500 on DraftKings is a pretty good GPP play.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I agree with that completely. I love rolling with Cooper Kupp. Really, John stole my stacks talk later on when he talked about Goff. So now that we mentioned Kupp as well, I'll throw that out there. Kupp as well as Woods and Cooks as well. I mean, all of those guys are really good GPP plays. They're really great to stack together with Goff's low ownership, and they're not too high. Kupp is a little bit higher on his ownership, and I do think he's in range for cash game play as well. But I think that's a really good combination. The nice thing about stacking up the Rams is those three receivers see 95-ish% of the snaps. You're not worrying about random third or kind of second stringers, third stringers stealing a touchdown or two. It's always going to kind of be isolated to those couple of players. So I think that's a really good play. Kupp has always been one of my favorites up until his injury last year. And yeah, load him up. I don't have any problems with him in cash games as well.
We're going to move on to tight ends here pretty quick, but there's a couple of guys we should mention. I think we haven't mentioned Mike Evans coming off of a big game because he's got a tough matchup this week. Tyler Lockett's also coming off of a really big game. Nobody talked about Lockett. Do we like him? I mean, I guess since you didn't mention him, not cash play, but maybe GPP play. Anyone wants to talk about Lockett at all?
I won't talk about Lockett, but on my list of GPP plays that I didn't get a chance to talk about, Arizona's been dreadful in defense, all aspects of defense. Lockett's 21%, and DK Metcalf, who has looked really good as a young rookie, is 6%. It's almost that Terry McLaurin, Paul Richardson thing I was just talking about. I'm more than happy to take DK Metcalf overweight than I am Tyler Lockett at 21%.
That's a good take. Let's talk about tight ends. Please thumbs up our video. Thanks for watching. Tight ends. Let's go to Steve first. Tell us about your tight end picks.
Sure. So I think right now from the chalky perspective, it looks like there's three guys that really stand out. I'll kind of hit on those three. So Evan Ingram, Travis Kelce, and Will Dissly are kind of the big names that are going to be the kind of the chalk ones. One thing that's been a little bit interesting for me anyways, this year is with so many of the tight ends being so chalky, they're coming into play in the flex positions a little bit more often than what they have been in the past. So that's just kind of a macro level type thing that I've noticed here in my lineups lately, and maybe I know a lot of people are kind of hesitant to do that in general, but it might be something worth considering in general with some of these guys. Kelsey, he's kind of he'll be popular again. He kind of feels like he's sliding under the radar a little bit, so maybe he won't get as popular as what I have right now. But even with his slow start, quote unquote, he's still been over 88 yards each of his 3 games so far. And kind of like Fournette, the touchdowns will come with Kelsey, and Kelsey's much better at scoring touchdowns than Fournette in general. So I think Kelsey makes a really good play. We talked about that was the Mahomes' first game in the Dome. I think Kelsey will take advantage of that, and would be pretty surprised to see him not score a touchdown this week. Evan Ingram has been, another one that's been really consistent so far this year. And he is, he's had 2 100-yard games already. And he's had over 100, or I think he scored over a touchdown each game. And he, with that game that we've talked about, some of these strategies with Paul Richardson or, Trey Quinn or something. Evan Ingram's a nice guy to run back with them, or vice versa as well. And then finally, kind of on Will Dissly, he's kind of an interesting one. I'm not so sure I buy into his high ownership completely here so far. Granted, he's scored 5 touchdowns in 6 games, but in those 6 career games, he's only had 20 catches as well. So there could be some negative touchdown regression coming his way. I know that they freed up a lot more snaps for him with the Fournette trade, and Arizona's been good, really or good for tight ends to go against. But it's kind of still Will Dissly, I guess. So it's not someone I'm super excited about.
Devin, talk to me about tight ends.
Yeah, I'm targeting 2 guys in cash, and that first one is Will Dissly. I think that he's just going to be incredibly popular on DraftKings at 3,600 as people look to try and save money at the tight end position. I'm not opposed to going Kelsey and Dissly. I think that if I'm going 2 tight ends, it's going to be Kelsey, just because at 72, he's basically a wide receiver that is sliding into your flex, and he's basically the number 1 target in that offense. So not opposed to doing that. The other guy that I'm looking at is actually Darren Waller going up against the Colts. I think that Waller we've seen it Jared Cook last year, and then this year Darren Waller's off to a pretty great start. So he's a guy that I think is a pretty big target, going to get a pretty big target share. He had 13 catches last week for 134 yards against a pretty good Vikings defense. So Carr, like I said, Carr likes to throw to his tight ends. We've seen breakout years from them. I'm gonna keep riding the train until I feel safer with Waller than I do Ingram in cash, because Ingram has these games where he just doesn't show up. So, and I think it's coming at some point. It hasn't so far this year, but I do think it's going to happen. And then the one name that I'll throw out there, and we saw it last week, and we've seen it the last really 2 weeks as a GPP play, is Greg Olsen. So over the last 2 weeks, he's went for 6 and 110 against the Bucks, and then 6 for 75 and 2 touchdowns against the Cardinals. So young quarterbacks have a tendency to look at the tight end, and Kyle Allen is no different. So I think he's going to continue to look at Olsen, especially in the red zone, as he looks to the veteran, as he continues to play, relatively well for the Panthers. So I do like Kelsey. Probably going to play him in the flex in some leagues, like I mentioned, and then it's Waller and Dissly for cash.
John, have all your guys been named? Should we move on, or do you have somebody else?
I might have one other guy, but I'll
Cool.
say I hate this position this week. I don't think that anybody stands out. The first 3 weeks, there was somebody I was pretty confident about, and I think I hit on most of those, especially in cash. But this week, there's nobody I really like. Ingram and Olsen were on my list. And for GPPs, I also had Disley. The two guys that maybe I don't think I heard were Austin Hooper against Tennessee. 4,300, 8,000 over at Fantasy Draft. Hooper's coming off of a 2-touchdown game. Game one, he caught 9 passes for 70. Sorry, there's a bug flying in my eye right now. Nine catches, 77 yards. Last week he had a pair of touchdowns against Buzzard's Colts. And Buzzard, you've already heard him tout Matt Ryan twice. So, I think that in GPP formats, Austin Hooper's cheap enough that I'm willing to throw some darts at him. And then the other guy that I haven't heard, and if you hate it, I would understand, because he broke out big in week 1, and then in week 2 and 3, he was a forgotten man. But he's got a lot of talent, first-round draft pick, top 10, TJ Hawkinson. Going against Kansas City, if you look at what Kansas City has done against the tight end position this year, they've allowed the 5th most fantasy points, and they played names like James O'Shaughnessy, Darren Waller, Nick Boyle. Mark Andrews is in there, but Mark Andrews didn't do anything. So, there's a big chance here that if they fall behind at Hawkinson, I think they're going to have to rely on his talents. And looking at Buzzard's ownership numbers, I think he was fairly low on the list at 4%. So I don't hate that play in tournament formats this week.
Nice. Let's go through defenses quickly. Play the team that plays Miami, right? Or
Yep.
are they too pricey this week? Devin, tell me.
Yeah, I'm playing I'm playing 2 teams this week. I'm playing the Chargers and I'm playing the Seahawks on FanDuel.
The Seahawks price on FanDuel is kind of ridiculous.
3,800 on FanDuel is a very tempting price. So Kyler Murray was sacked 8 times last week and turned the ball over twice. So at 37 on FanDuel, sorry. I think it's a pretty solid play.
Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, the play the defenses against Miami is a pretty good strategy so far. I think you can't go wrong with that in the cash game option, as long as you have the salary to get there. The sites are catching on, pricing up the Chargers. So on DraftKings they're at 3,800, and where are they on FanDuel?
5,300.
53. So very expensive. They're still coming out as really great value. So if you get up to them, go ahead and give them a play. It's really tough though in tournaments to get to them, because their ownerships are going to be pretty high as well. So I might have to fade there.
Yep. John?
Play the Chargers.
Dig it. Stacks. John, hit me with some stacks.
My favorite stack, I think, of the week is Jared Goff to Robert Woods, and Buzzard kind of confirmed that he likes this as well, I guess. So, Woods is a guy that has been underperforming, and I don't believe that he's fallen off a cliff. I just think that things have not gone in his direction. I suspect he's due for some positive regression in terms of both yardage as well as touchdowns, much like I talked about with Mike Evans in my article last week. So that's a game that I think you should be looking at. And then I already mentioned Paul Richardson. Terry McLaurin is a guy that everybody's talking about, and I think that you can look at Case Keenum, believe it or not. He's what is he, 4,900. I like him on DraftKings, not so much on Fantasy Draft. Fantasy Draft, he's at almost 11,000. I think there are better ways to go there. But on DraftKings at 4,900, we're talking about saving salary. There's a lot of ways you can load up on that game on the cheap. You can go with Devin's Wayne Gallman. You can go with Keenum, pair him up with Robinson. I love the game stack there is what I'm getting at. So don't be afraid to go with 2 wide receivers on your favorite team. In this case, for me, it's probably Case Keenum, and 2 of his receivers, probably Vernon Davis and Robinson, and then run them back with a wide receiver, a tight end on the other team, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, that kind of thing. So that's where I'm at.
What do you think, Steve?
So I've mentioned Matt Ryan a couple times, so I won't talk about him anymore. But I do like that stack. So certainly load him up with Ridley and Julio. Another one that I'm kind of interested in is Tom Brady and Edelman. So James Devlin got put on the out for the year on the IR this week. He had been a staple for the run game for the Patriots over their recent history. It'll be really interesting to see how that affects Sony Michel going forward, but they certainly didn't run him nearly as much last week. He only had 22% of the snaps, and what I think that they're going to do is replace a little bit of that with James White, with Julian Edelman, and we could really see Edelman get peppered with a lot of targets. I do think Edelman had some issues at the end of last week. He came out of the game with an injury, so certainly watch and make sure that everything is a go from that standpoint. But I like that option with Edelman.
Devin, who are you stacking?
If Denzel Ward misses, I'm stacking Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, and Odell Beckham together. I think that Marquise Brown will, like I mentioned, will be facing off against Terrence Mitchell and have one of the best speed advantages of the day. So we've seen that both he and Beckham, it only takes one long catch to change the game. So that's the one I'm looking at. And then I'm going Mitch Trubisky and Allen Robinson. I just get this weird feeling that this Minnesota-Chicago game is going to be, people are just going to write it off, and Robinson is the top target there. I think that Trubisky looked better on Monday and could be a guy that I don't love it, but I'll take a shot on it in one lineup.
It's a bold play against the Minnesota defense. Let's go to parting thoughts. Steve, thank you so much for being on our show. We want to hear your words of wisdom to send off our viewers.
All right, so thanks for having me. Hopefully I'll get the invite sometime as well once I get another check out to somebody for missing. So I guess the one thing I wanted to kind of point out was fantasy draft. They're continue to run some great contests over there each week. They have a $700,000 main event with $100,000 up top, which is a really good tournament. They have rake free now. They make you pay a subscription. So if you're not familiar with that, you just kind of pay a subscription instead of the rake each week. So through the first couple of weeks, I did some calculations, and it looks like I would have been paying about $6,000 in rake to some of the other sites, and it was closer to $500 that I paid to Fantasy Draft for subscription fees. So pretty significant difference there. Basically, you're playing every 6th week for free, which was one way to think about it. So it's a really great opportunity to get out there and give them a shot.
Nice. Yeah, they've definitely changed the sort of the standard structure. So give that a look. Devin, words of wisdom, parting thoughts.
I got nothing.
All right. John, what do you got?
Well, I was going to say that, but he stole my line.
That's true.
So yeah, we've got this big contest on FanDuel this week, where I guess how is it broken down? Where what are you paying out, Devin?
90
to the winner, 90 distributed between the people who beat us.
90 to anyone who beats us.
Yeah, he could pay out 90 to 5 people.
So if Dodds, myself, and Ryan just intentionally bust, then you're going to owe quite a bit of money.
And you all will have an invoice at your house on Tuesday.
All right. So my email address is john.lee@footballguys.com if you want to make out my roster, if you know what I mean. So, that's my parting thought for the week. I'll see you on FanDuel, you other fellas, and then get us up to 10K. And I'm going to throw I'm going to juicy up the pot And I already know Devin didn't say this, but Joe Bryant, owner of Football Guys, is also going to do it. So that 10,000 event's going to be a lot bigger and a lot better. So let's make it happen.
Yep, I like it. Check out all our content over at footballguys.com. We'll be back next Friday morning with our Week 5 episode. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and special guest Steve Buzzard, I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.